Well, three. Great. Okay, so let's get rolling. So hi, I'm Will Kratz, CEO and founder of Hand, Human, and Digital. We've got a great panel today. We're going to have three different sections to talk about. But before I get into talking about the sections, I would like to thank all of my panelists for joining us today and to start with introductions so that everyone can get to know and meet the panelists on today's webinar. So can we start with Sean? Why don't we start with Sean?
Great. I'm Sean McNulty. I do a column at The Ankler called The Wake Up. It's a daily overview of everything going on in Hollywood media, from AI, sports rights, movie deals, all of it, and how it relates to each other at theankler.com.
And Caroline.
Hi, I'm Caroline Gigrich. I am founder of the Daily Marauder and a marketing innovation consultant. I spent about 20 years in marketing and technology at companies like HBO, Showtime. HBO with Sean, and most recently
Showtime with Will.
Showtime with Will.
Yeah.
Gosh, I wish I had you all so I could just name check you all. And most recently, Warner Music Group. I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you, Caroline. Kassi.
Hello, I am Kassi Burns, and I'm a senior attorney at King & Spalding, and I've used AI and machine learning in my practice for over 10 years. So as generative AI has become more relevant, I have followed that trend. And I also, in my free time, have a podcast called Kassi and, where I talk to everyday people about how they are interacting with technology.
Thank you, Kassi. Simon.
Hello, Simon Pullman. I'm an entertainment lawyer and partner at the law firm of Pryor Cashman. My practice focuses on company-side entertainment law, representing companies, studios, networks, financiers, video game developers, those kinds of entities. We are starting to see this come up contractually as an issue, but as I think everybody on the panel is aware, and probably most of our attendees, this really it's been bubbling under, but it became a very live issue during the Guild strikes last year. So I'm looking forward to discussing it more.
And thank you, Simon. And so also Veronica, dialing in from Prague, Czech Republic.
Hi, my name is Veronica. I'm an IP attorney set within the EU region, so bringing in some interesting, let's say, angle from there. I focus currently on consultancy services regarding use of generative AI from the perspective of corporate right to publicity, personality rights as we know them in Europe, and other legal aspects.
Thank you, Veronica. And I want to give a big thanks and shout out to Sabrina Lamb and the DBC Brand Communications teams, our partner on today's webinar. That's Bill Dottie and the team at DBC are our media partners on this webinar today, and we're really, really thankful to have them here with us and helping facilitate this whole webinar for folks. And so this is being recorded. We will be posting today's session in its entirety on our YouTube channel, Hand's YouTube channel. And also we'll be doing, of course, the usual cut downs for LinkedIn and sharing different sound bites and things like that from a content marketing perspective. But we've had multiple people reach out to me and say, I can't make it on Friday, but is there going to be a recording? And the answer is yes, definitely, absolutely there is. And it will be available in at least in a few days' time here with the weekend coming up right here on Friday. So I want to get things started and to say we have a couple different themes and topics to touch on here with everybody and to get into it, to talk about applications of AI in entertainment. And we had a great prep call this week, a lively prep call, where this particular topic seemed to consume the majority of the 30 minutes we had. But I want to throw it to Sean first, as a reporter and as a media analyst and someone covering the space right there in Hollywood. What are some of the things you've been seeing and hearing from your grapevine of folks in the industry?
Yeah, and I think as Simon mentioned, it was a really hot topic in 2023. The tech has only gotten better since that time. The writer strike ended just about a year ago at this time. The actors, it was mid-November. There's been a lot of developments, but I wouldn't say, it's kind of that topic of we're going to see how this goes, versus it's still on the pressing topic of everybody's mind. There's obviously a lot of other larger contraction going on in the business, and between spending pullback, layoffs have still been going on a lot. throughout Hollywood in 2024. So, but you've been seeing, studios taking checks. Lionsgate, of course, made probably the biggest deal, the most pronounced deal so far, to essentially create an AI tool for them to use. They're not licensing Lionsgate films for everybody to make movies with. It wasn't that. But the estimates, the reporting at the Anglers from my colleagues is, probably about $1 billion worth of revenue across the board from that field, and could be up, almost 10 times that within a year, maybe, 18 months. So this is real money coming into the ecosystem at a time when the cable bundle is melting and the money's going down there. Everybody's looking at how we're going to grow revenues. But how do you do it, say, responsibly or without giving away, the farm, so to speak? So once you do it, you can't get it back in a certain sense. So there's a lot of that weighing going on, but a lot of experimentation, certainly. But in terms of the talent part of it, and Simon, I'd like to maybe hear your thoughts on this in terms of, it seemed to be a lot more of a pressing issue or a hot topic last year, especially among the writers, where I haven't seen that as much in the writing community, maybe a little more in the acting community, but that's where things are at right now.
So Simon, is there some insights you'd like to build on top of Sean's thoughts?
Certainly. I think it's a multifaceted issue, and there are sort of different uses and lanes of use within the established entertainment companies. The deals that the Lionsgate deal that was announced, but I imagine we will see very similar ones, is ostensibly aimed at using AI internally based on their own data. Now, what exactly that they're using it for is sort of still behind the veil somewhat, but there's a lot of talk about making more efficient workflows. There are these kind of things that feel sort of very easy and justifiable uses. The next degree at sort of the studio level, I suppose, would be starting to really use it in a wholesale way for VFX workers, which is why the workers there are potentially susceptible to being disrupted. Next we've got sort of the category of digital replicas, which we'll talk about, I think, later in this. But examples of that in some way would be if you saw the last Alien movie, if you saw Rogue One perhaps previously, and that technology is getting better. And then sort of in the further future, can you entirely or substantially generate either using text to video or video to video there? I'll just say that there's also sort of a shadow economy, which is in the creator and amateur space, which is sort of on the horizon as well, and I think is a lot of what is driving the concerns of the media companies. Just finally, to Sean's piece around actors, it's interesting because obviously, the writers, I think, to an extent, have other fish to fry presently because TV orders are down so much. They've got sort of other concerns in certain respects. But as far as the actors go, I mean, one of the big topics was around consent in the SAG deal and what constitutes consent and when it has to be given. I, as somebody who is company side as an entertainment lawyer, still very much get comments, no AI use, and more restricted uses that go way beyond what was negotiated. Part of me says, well, why did we spend 9 months, negotiating this,
right,
if you're just going to try and prohibit it altogether? But what I would say as a general final observation is there is a lot of concern that there is not, and I would include myself among this, by the way, there is not a lot of deep, granular, technical know-how within Hollywood. And so it's very, with all of these things, and we saw a similar thing with the whole blockchain thing, to be frank, but it's sort of viewed as this thing that has to be addressed, but people don't necessarily have the vocabulary to be able to do it in the nuanced way that's perhaps required.
I hope you don't mind me jumping in. I would like to see how I've seen it be used as a consumer. I'm not an insider in the industry like Sean and Simon, but I love watching documentaries and true crime series, and I've seen very frequently more use of AI clones of subject matters that are no longer available. Of course, Anthony Bourdain is one example, Andy Warhol, and I've even seen it in true crime scenario where it's not a full rendering in motion, but they take photos of deceased people from the 60s or something, and they do some level of AI manipulation to enhance the story. And I could see,
They
especially
used it in the Backstreet Boys NSYNC documentary.
yeah,
It's a few
exactly,
documents.
exactly.
Yeah, Netflix had another one too. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think what's interesting is that in the true crime scenario where they're potentially using it for create clones of people who have been victims, you know, that may have been deceased for a few years. So that's another interesting use I've seen pop up.
I think the other thing that's interesting about that is the reaction to it. Because I loved that Anthony Bourdain documentary, but there was like public outcry from the voice clone that was used to like reincarnate his words. Obviously, that's not true across the board. Nobody's like, don't use James Earl Jones as Darth Vader. But it is interesting to see the public's reaction to the use of AI.
Well, what I see in Europe are two aspects of this, let's say, miscommunication or some backlash. One is general public, the uncanny valley and a lot of ethical concerns. And the other one is, let's say, reaction of professionals and talents. I don't know if any of you heard of the celebrity neighbor wars, something spoof / comedy that was broadcasted by one of the commercial televisions in the UK. And first group of people who reacted were attorneys, you know, exchanging discussions. How did they clear this? Because all of the celebrities came from different regions, from EU, from UK, from the United States, and they had zero knowledge, as far as I'm concerned, about their faces being used for the show. And then I read an article sort of explaining why they decided not to go on with a series number 2, because they had some discussions with the representatives of the talents at issue. And I think part of it is, let's say, lack of information about technological aspects of such use, about some legal limitations, and some, let's say, traditional business standards, which is basically the CCCC, as you described it, you know, trying at least to let them know, get the consent where you need it, and you know, go on from there to prevent some negative PR at least.
Well,
when you read, go ahead.
Well, I
Carolyn.
just wanted to add in one note, which is what I mentioned in our earlier call, which is AI has actually been in use for a long time in Hollywood. We're all now talking about Gen AI, and obviously there was like the explosion since ChatGPT came online, but it's not to say that AI hasn't been in existence. I mentioned that I had been at Wall Street Journal Tech Live this week and had watched Ted Sarandos be asked this very question. Ted Sarandos, co-CEO of Netflix. And his answer on them using AI was that they would help make their creators better, i.e. not replace talent. But of course, he is a very senior executive that has to make that point. But then the other thing he said was really interesting to me. It was more about how they retain subscribers. And as we all know, Netflix has the gold standard on subscriber retention. But he talked about using AI to improve the customer UI and get people to the content they want to watch faster. And to me, honestly, that's one of the smartest uses of AI because it's directly relative to revenue generation or revenue maintenance.
retention and growth. Retention and growth. Both, yeah.
Just a quick remark. I recently learned that this area is being actively explored already in the pre-production. And when you are basically trying to use AI, non-generative AI, to customize the created content, either the script, you know, or the characters to fit within the interest of specific region or you know, group of you know, potential viewers and fans of the content.
Yeah, well, maybe just to put a button on it, there's kind of like two camps here, or two divisions of work, broadly speaking here. One, which got attention a lot last year because of the strikes, was the writers and the actors, and that took the forefront. Where I think we're seeing most of the development, to Caroline's point, is really more in the, say, the VFX graphics side of things, which traditionally in Hollywood look, we don't hand draw animation anymore. This has been moving forward for many years. Bob Zemeckis is releasing Here with Tom Hanks and Robin Wright, which is he's actively saying, I've used AI as a tool to make as a visual tool. They shot that movie. Robin and Tom were there and he was there and it was all done. But so there's a kind of like bifurcation of like, all right, yeah, and this one sense of visual for storyboarding, for updating people's looks in movies, and they maybe crowd, there hasn't been a large crowd shot in a movie in years, so it's like this has been used for a while. We just didn't call it AI, we called it CGI. So that part of it, but in terms of the actors and writers part, that's where it's probably still a lot of question marks and still a lot of things hanging over that. Well,
yeah, absolutely. And I think you were speaking with regards to Here in Zemeckis' film is the de-aging process.
De-aging, yes, exactly. Which Scorsese used famously with De Niro just a few years ago. We didn't call it AI. We called it CGI.
Or Mark Hamill in The Mandalorian. It's like very popular.
It's not. Yeah, this isn't new. To Caroline's point.
Exactly. Yeah. And or young
Harrison Ford, right? Last summer, Indiana Jones. Yeah, right.
So these technologies, whether they going from traditional CGI to prompt-based generative AI creation of images and footage is kind of it seems to me like an evolution that was long in the making. But there was a comment recently, I may have been at your Wall Street Journal conference, a friend of ours in the industry, Yves Bergquist at University of Southern California Entertainment Technology Center, was asked how deeply has AI penetrated into Hollywood. He said his quote was, if I paraphrase and don't mess it up, was that there's not a single frame currently in the productions that they know of and talk about that has not been touched by AI in some way.
Yeah, and I think this goes to the sort of because there are a lot of legal issues and technology issues here as well, but clearly part of this is an audience perception issue as well. And in many industries, certainly in gaming, I think to some extent in film and television, there is an audience wariness or even an audience repulsion to it. But that's the uses of AI that perhaps they are cognizant of, that they're aware of. Color correction, even something like sound mixing. Clearly, we in our pre-call, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more, dubbing for foreign languages and so on.
Localization, absolutely.
So it sort of remains to be seen whether this is something that the audience is going to accept, or it'll just at some point in time just become sort of resigned to. But that's the differentiation for me is between things that are benign, uses that the audience won't even know about, and things that, the example you cited with the Tom Hanks film, that's gonna be a thing. And much like there was a reaction to Zemeckis' movie, the Polar Express 20 years ago, right?
Right.
I could imagine that not being well received. We shall see. A lot of people complained that the worst part of the last Alien movie was the use of that technology. But there will be many other uses, presumably, that the audience won't know about, that will just cut costs and eliminate jobs.
Another example of the audience is cheering for the usage might be embodied in Peter Jackson's Beatles documentary around also in They Shall Not Grow Old, the World War I documentary that he worked on to reanimate some of those images of soldiers from that time.
Well, and sometimes the use cases are really endearing. Like at one point, singer Randy Travis had a stroke, right? He lost use of his voice. They re-engaged his voice with a voice clone, and people think that's just a generated voice, but it's actually quite specific in the sense that they selected a singer that sounded like Randy Travis. They mapped the voice clone over his voice while he was singing, and then a producer fine-tuned it all and turned it into Randy Travis. And the video of them playing the music and his family hearing him again for the first time, I mean, I cried a lot. Like the context is really important, I think.
Absolutely. So we're about 20 plus after the hour, and I want to move on to the next of our 3 areas of discussion today. And that is coming up here with protecting talent rights and combating deepfakes. So before we get on to the third and final, which will be the rise of the consent-based digital replica. There's been new legislation that we've seen in the state of California, Governor Newsom signing on the bill requiring consent for replicas to be created. but also at the same time, why is that the story? Well, the rise of fraudulent representations of talent, whether it was Tom Hanks or Taylor Swift or Mr. Beast and on and on. These examples are not, you don't have to look far to see these examples of fraudulent representations of notable public figures. Sean, I'm going to throw it back to you because I know in the Ankler, you guys talk a lot about what are both the kind of ethical usages of these things and potentially nefarious usage of these things. Well, what are some of the things you're hearing from your network?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's a thing we talked about, the vault at CAA. So I'll start with the opportunity. Why don't we start with the follow the money? It's Hollywood. Let's start with that, which is where this stuff all kind of lays in the end anyway. So essentially CAA is offering a service, I guess you'd call, for their clients, so that they can do full scans of them visually, audio, I'm sure voice scan, the whole, your digital foot, DNA, if you will, is encapsulated in, quote, the vault, aka a thumb drive in CAA. But that way, in theory, you could go and if you, again, not maybe you wouldn't shoot a movie with this, but if you want to be in a coffee ad in Japan, you wouldn't have to fly to Japan. They could use these assets, create the ad. You would have approval over the final, creative, but that way it saves you time and it gets you a nice multi-million-dollar payday from a coffee company in Japan, and everybody's happy and on their way. CAA gets their 10% of that deal. And so that, there's a way to do more work without being there, or just stuff you don't want to do, or stuff if you're shooting a movie for 3 months and you can't get away for a certain thing, you could, so there's opportunity there. My big question is what happens when I leave CAA, and what happens to all that information, but that's probably a question for another time. But that's an opportunity case of that. And I think the number one thing you hit on for the downside of it is certainly just people using yourself in ads that you do not approve, which I think is probably going to be the biggest whack-a-mole that's going to be out there. Much less, because I think if it's going to be a fake clip that's like, pornography is another aspect you could about, or other things that just don't seem like Tom Hanks would do that. That stuff may be seen through the lines, but it seems like, oh, Tom Hanks is selling me this thing and it's on Facebook and it's, it's in this legitimate-ish platform where you can, okay, this seems like, so that's where the whack-a-mole is going to really start. And there are companies, which we'll dive into, I'm sure, trying to track your digital footprint. But so I think, that's where kind of people, it's not a total, let's shut this down. There's definitely how do we engage this to make more money and be, and maybe make lives easier, whatever it might be. So it's a dual-sided thing on the Hollywood front, certainly from the talent point of view, I think.
Who wants to go next?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in here because I'm not. This is the premise, right? This is the premise and the promise here.
Right.
You can make more money by and do less work. And I'll be frank, it comes from a place, in my opinion, of greed.
Sure.
I'm not certain it's going to benefit anyone, but to the extent it does benefit anybody, it's going to be the top, the top, very top band. Because, as I said in our pre-call, you might have, for that coffee ad, for that movie, for whatever that use may be, your list. And if you can't get this person because they're exclusive to some brand or they're unavailable or whatever else, you go down the list. Well, now, you can have Tom Hanks, you can have Taylor Swift in a particular category, and they can be everywhere at once. So they are going to, and Taylor Swift, again, I said, drained isn't the right word. She consumed a huge proportion of the revenue in the music business over the last 2 years. It is going to cause, if indeed this premise is correct and there's something behind it, money sort of go there. On the sort of the unauthorized use piece, I think you've got two pieces to this. You've got the commercial misuse, as we said, which is already happening. It's rife. I think there is an audience education issue around AI in general, but that you're going to see countless cease and desist and lawsuits around this. And then the other piece is reputational. And that, that will be statements that are attributed to people, could be political, could be, something else like that they didn't actually say. It could be them doing something that they didn't do, sort of a false light type of a piece, or particularly any female celebrity or public figure of any kind is going to be subjected even more so to pornographic deepfakes, and that is going to be a big problem for the legislation. It's going to be a big problem for technology. It's going to be a big problem for society. And forget about celebrities, by the way, because this is also happening to lay people as well. Now, you know, look, does it get to the point where the audience just doesn't trust anything that's on a screen? Right? That's the other way. It's like, okay, well, I don't believe it because I don't believe anything on my screen anymore. I can't unless there's some sort of watermarking, thing. But this is going to throw up issues for the business and for society in huge ways. And as somebody remarked earlier, the technology isn't going to get worse at this point in time. You know, unless you know, whatever the quote from the Matrix, they scorched the sky, right? Unless we're sort of, you know, it's only going to get better. It's only going to get more convincing. Elder fraud, right? People calling up, ostensibly calling their grandparents. I need money now.
Right.
I've got an emergency. Wire me
That's
the thing.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things. And so the question is this: are the tech companies going to regulate this? Historically, doesn't seem likely. So then it's going to be, okay, you know, is it also dealt with at the tech level by different companies, or is it dealt with, you know, by some combination of guilds where applicable, legislation, you know, people sort of policing this stuff? I don't know. You know, we've got 42 people in the thing. I mean, I hope everyone's ready for a brave new world.
I would also add, you know, I think that there's an access to justice issue here. The Taylor Swifts of the world, all of that echelon, you know, they're able to afford a Simon on retainer and be able to make sure they have an attorney on hand to review their contracts. The day-to-day actor who's just really, you know, doing their best to get gigs. And even on the media aspect of this presentation, you know, influencers, content creators out there, maybe they're doing campaign-based contracts. And I've seen people who on a campaign for maybe a beauty product, they give their likeness away. This is pre-Gen AI. And then that likeness is used in advertising in a product that they had nothing to do with. So
right, so
I
it's like
think
you do like this, you sign the stock model release is what you're talking about, and then down the line you find you're being used in something you didn't contemplate.
Right. So as these laws are getting enacted, there still is an access to justice, like being aware of your rights, how to protect those rights, having the time to do it. I think another aspect that you were touching on, Simon, is transparency. Going back to the documentaries, I'm seeing the documentaries, I think, after the hullabaloo that occurred with Anthony Bourdain's documentary. Most of them are being very good at disclosing in subtitles or some disclaimer, this was created with generative AI. And then the third element that's interesting to all of this as well is the tension that it creates with First Amendment rights. So, you know, that's something just to reference here and not get into detail. That's a whole other presentation. That's another tension.
And Veronica can probably speak to that, because this is one of the other things around all of this, which is in the US, we have like currently a patchwork quilt of state law, but a whole different ballgame in Europe.
Well, thank you very much for bringing this up, because we have this dichotomy at the moment when it comes to name, image, voice likeness, and artificial intelligence, because there will be transparency clause in the AI Act, and I'm really curious how this will play out in generative AI technology, even professional one, and even, let's say, AI assisted content or content, audiovisual content, including AI generated scenes, because there are specific rules with some creative and other carve outs in the AI Act. And also it really comes down in Europe at the moment to the legal representation. Let me give you an example. There was a crew of actors, and there was one A-lister who managed to negotiate an opt-out from the use of his name, of his image and voice for post-production AI assisted sort of reshoots, which is understandable from the producer's point of view, that they basically needed to save time, and there's nothing wrong with it, as long as they are fully informed about what it takes technologically and GDPR wise. But there was just one person who managed to negotiate the opt-out, which complicated things quite significantly. And we also have right to publicity alternative, which is personality rights. And again, to simplify, individuals are better protected than in the United States. But again, we have exceptions and carve-outs, and you have to know them. And it slightly differs from state to state, even within EU. And then it comes to post-mortem protection, which again may differ from state to state, the same as in the United States. So it's kind of, very tricky field at the moment, even here.
Veronica, I would love your thoughts, not to put you on the spot, but the EU AI Act in an unacceptable risk category is subversive AI systems. And it's not well defined, but there is some reference to AR and VR having the potential to manipulate users. And so it'll be interesting to see like deepfake or digital replicas integrated into media and entertainment. I think in particular media, potentially, like how that will line up with that category of risk in the EU AI Act.
Oh, yeah, that's very interesting because synthetic media as such, generally speaking, and once again, oversimplification, don't fall into this prohibited, unacceptable risk category. They fall to let's say, much lesser regulation. They would be subjected to variety of transparency obligations, but are much less regulated. But it always comes down, from my perspective, to, let's say, the ability of the technology. So the same could be said even when I exaggerated about personalization of content or service. It always depends how you use, to what extent do you use, let's say, psychology or subconscious decision making and potential threats it may lead to for the individual here, let's say viewer or customer, to some interactive content. It can be even, let's say, media content. I'm not saying creative, because then again we are getting on a thin ice of all these carve-outs and exceptions. But I think in reality it will be very different story than on a paper. That's you're right there. That would be my opinion.
I just
Go
had
ahead,
one
Caroline.
thing to add in, because I'm much more bullish than Simon is, as evidenced even from the pre-call. But a lot of my examples are from music, but I absolutely see ways that this could benefit talent with the right stipulations in point. I want to make it clear that I am very much for protecting artist IP of all kinds. But the example that immediately comes to mind for me is the ABBA experience, where they've been de-aged, their voices have been de-aged, and it's a huge phenomenon, at least making over $140 million. And I see many, many other cases where that could be rolled out. Now, ABBA are still alive. There are many examples of artists that are no longer with us that, it would benefit the estate. But even today, came online Brenda Lee's Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree in Spanish via like AI voice assisted translation. And it's a brilliant move from Universal Music Group. Like, are we ready for Christmas holiday? I don't know. But like the fact that they just re-upped a song and gave a catalog song new, fresh flavor is absolutely going to generate revenue for the rights of the artists wherever they live. And to me, that's a benefit. And I think about it personally because all day long, all I do is use either Claude or ChatGPT to like hyperdrive myself. So it seems to me that figuring out the right guardrails for artists to feel like they have the control, but yet utilize all of this technology to their advantage would be of benefit.
So I want to be really crystal clear on something, which is as follows. I love ABBA.
There's one takeaway from this whole panel, everybody.
I love ABBA.
That is it.
I mean, look, we might as well just retread because I just want to, what we said in the thing. My concern a little bit about this is, look, the whole dead person translating, blah blah blah, it just feels macabre to me. But moreover, you talk about for artists, just to re-emphasize the point. If you're going to see ABBA, if you're going to see Taylor Swift in your backyard, they can literally come boom into your house now. You pay a pay-per-view fee of $100. You're not going out to see your local band. So again, value-driven to brands, value-driven to franchises, to mega stars. And one thing that the entertainment business, I think music has done better than this, by the way, to a certain extent, not live touring, because live touring, as we know, is dominated by the Rolling Stones, Bon Jovi, bands 50s, 60s, 70s. But I do think it has brought more sort of new stars. Hollywood film and television.
I can't believe you didn't mention Taylor Swift or Beyonce.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
I had a visceral reaction, Simon.
I mean, big live touring, but I mean, if you look at the statistics on, for the last decade, top 20, you will see mostly bands that originated in the 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe 90s. But the issue, the point is sort of this. It's just, Hollywood has done a terrible job of breaking through new stars. And I'm not sure the audience will accept this anyway. I don't want to see Tom Hanks as he was in big starring in movies, ad nauseum. I understand why the agency would like, and the estate would like for that to happen. I understand that if you're the estate of course. But from an audience perspective, no, I want to see the actual next Tom Hanks, meaning some actual human being with talent. And I think that's where and you are right, we are divided on this, because I don't use any AI tools. I don't understand how it creates any level of efficiency. I think it's mostly absolute trash. And it's not what I want as an audience member, There you go. Cards on the table.
Yeah.
Well, and I have to respond just really quickly with what I said in the pre-call, which is I feel like, especially given if we're talking music, like many existing artists alive today are pulling up emerging artists by their bootstraps, by like featuring them on albums. It's a creative strategy to launch new artists into the marketplace. And I can see that, again, I'm not translating well to Hollywood, but I'm just thinking in my music hat on here, that there would be so many opportunities to do that in music. Again, your point about talent on Hollywood is well formed. Like, I want to see human beings too, but I do like this creative use of.
I love that if it's Taylor Swift or Beyonce with some artist who's 20. If it's somebody who's deceased, again, the estate, and this gets to SAG-AFTRA a little bit.
I'm talking about First Way, you just said.
Okay, good. Yeah, well, but then I would say, great, let's get them in the room together and let's make some real organic magic rather than splicing it together with using computers.
I want to ask Sean a particular question on this, is that because since Hollywood's been addicted to reboots and sequels, franchises for so long, is the connection to the sense of the, as Caroline said, giving new life to a de-aged celebrity or a James Dean like replica, like a reanimated version of James Dean, is that kind of an extension of the reboot and sequel mindset?
Yeah, that's and it's only getting worse in Hollywood. I keep a running tally of just the 2024 boom in remakes for TV and film, and it's probably running 20 deep at this point, if not more.
Matlock back.
Well, but we don't, because he's not in it, and I don't understand what the heck they're doing with that. That's a whole. I'm leaving that aside.
I love Kathy Bates. Don't get me wrong.
Oh no, but why call it Matlock? Just call it another name. Anyway, side point. But your point, but you have who's in charge in Hollywood. All right, who are the studio heads? They're not 40-year-olds anymore. They're back when I was growing up in the business. They were generally in their upper 30s, mid 40s. Now the same people are doing those jobs. They're in their 60s. So what do boomers and Gen Xers like to do? Reboot their youth. So it's like, this is a lot of what, listen, I have this argument with studio heads to development executives all the time. And I'm like, all right, Wonka, fine. St. Elmo's Fire is a different thing. It's a particular story that there's no IP here, and this is what there's a headline from Rob Lowe yesterday. Yeah, Denny and I are really working on this.
On its way. They're working on it.
They're hard at work on it. Here's the thing. He said they're really hard at work on it. Literally, his follow-up comment was, "We're trying to find the story in the script." So yeah, they have no idea. They have a title. That's what this is.
And Sean, I call what you're describing fake IP, which is just basically taking a title
that totally worked for the actor or the right.
But very, very briefly, because I don't want to take any more time. But as I said in the pre-call, I think Hollywood has done itself no favors here, because it has been so reliant on fantasy worlds, on big brands, and on digitally created worlds, background, scenery, even if it's really supposed to be based in New York City. And I think they've opened themselves up for disruption. If you watch a movie from the 70s or 80s, it's real people in real environments. There's a scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark, one of the best movies ever, where somebody's in the desert, probably the Sahara, wherever they shot it, and a fly lands on his face, and you see it crawl down and go into his mouth. He kept acting. And that would never happen with in any kind of today, because it would be digitally taken out. But it's sort of the magic of serendipity. There's a lot of sort of luck to it. That's sort of real filmmaking. And Hollywood very seldom does that anymore. Right. And that sort of has opened up. First of all, they will if they play in that field, they will lose to video games. Video game developers are far more adept at creating things in and around digital spaces. But then there's also the army of, as we talked about, people in their bedrooms who will have access to Sora or these other tools with an idea. Maybe they can film something in their backyard and then overlay special effects. And then guess what? You're not competing against 6 other studios and 3 streamers. You're competing against hundreds of thousands of people.
But I guess I would just say, what about the competition already from like people shooting on their iPhones, like or just influencers like Mr. Beast? Like it's already come for them with other tech. It's just this is the latest iteration.
Agreed, but this is exactly the point, Caroline, because the part of the reason that Hollywood has gone to these, right? So if you look at opening weekend, any box office report, Sean will tell you. They talk about how many premium screens the movie opened on, and a lot of revenue. So Hollywood has gone to bigger screen, bigger sort of effect, bigger universes. And I agree, like TikTok and YouTube are eating entertainment. They are, especially younger people under 30, they're eating that. But Hollywood to date at least had, well, we've got the superhero stuff. We've got these big brands. But now you're going to have a situation, and again, we need to think there is going to be rife copyright infringement, because people will make, with this phenomenon of fan films, they will make things like this and then they'll sell them, and then it is going to be whack-a-mole. So it's that competitive advantage, I feel, is just going to slowly erode unless something is done about it.
But Will, I'm going to tell you one thing is, I think so mentioned earlier, but the audience is going to tell you if they don't want to see you de-age Rob Lowe, they're not going to see that friggin' movie. And that's the number one thing. Like, will there be a ton of experimentation? Yes. And this is what you're going to see now is like, hey, what about this? And what about this? And the best thing about it is the audience always votes. That's, so I love the box office because every Sunday, America tells you what they think of your great ideas, and they will tell you in their dollars. They left the house to go see the thing. I will say, there's a poll I put in the Wake Up this morning from UCLA. It's 1,500 students. There's people 10 to 24-year-olds. Their number one favorite pastime activity, if you leave out the cost of doing it, going to the movies. This is 10 to 24-year-olds. Okay. So it's like, and this is regarding of cost and transportation and about, video games.
These are not just film students we're talking about.
No, this is not a UCLA film program. No, exactly. So there is this, desire to go back and be together for things. What plays great? Horror. Why? Because it stinks on streaming? Horror. Because you're sitting at home by yourself. You want to be in a room with everybody having this experience. Those films, so comedy's going to learn this again. So, Will, to your point, this experimentation will go on, and what's going to work, or what? Back to ABBA. ABBA was a first mover experience. What happens when the 10th act does that? Taylor Swift. Oh my God, we're going to see 20 concert movies. How many have we seen? 1. You know what? Usher put a concert film out in September. No one talked about it or saw it. 4 days in theaters, not even talked about. So remember what, these things spur on. But to your point, Will, I think, again, there'll be a lot of stuff tried. Can you do something? Yes. Will the public tell you if that's a good idea or not? 100%.
Well, and I think, again, as a consumer, I think that the audience likes to see things. Like, look at Everything Everywhere All at Once. That was a movie that new content, original content, heavily relied on real effects. They didn't heavily, overuse CGI or anything. And that was the first movie I went to where I was just absolutely so excited. I made a point of not reading anyone writing anything about it. And really it was that first feeling of like when I went and saw Amelie, 20 years ago, where it was just very, very exciting and magical. So there's an opportunity maybe for people, of course there has to be money to fund that.
Take the swings. That's it. That's the bed. You got to get up to bat all the time. And, that's the thing that the ecosystem has to maintain. And to Simon's point about just regurgitating the same stuff, if you're not taking new swings, you guarantee you will die as a business. I don't care how many times you redo this. If you don't keep that, and that's what Hollywood's coming back to now. I know there's a lot of back and forth about creating new stars, things like that. But there is more energy about this stuff about, all right, these things are created, oh, right, this is what everybody forgot it for 6 years and coming back around to it. And we're starting back to Caroline's point, using the big act to promote the small. This is a key part of this. I can't just do this be selfish. I have to do those kind of things. Well,
and that's the thing. AI is not good at human creativity. Now, what you're talking about, Sean, is like Hollywood not being creative, but true creativity, everything, everywhere, all at once. Like AI is not going to come up with that idea. It's just not. It's not. Maybe in the future of AGI, maybe, but definitely not today. It's not able to do that. It needs a person with an original creative idea, and the AI is just like fine tuning things like CGI and otherwise, but it's not like coming up with the idea.
Yeah.
One thing I'd like to, if you don't mind, Will, the combating deepfakes portion of this section, I know we talked about in the pre-call, but I think, beyond de-aging of Tom Hanks or the authorized use of digital replicas, the unauthorized use, the deepfakes, and I saw a documentary this weekend on Tegan and Sarah and how someone was able to deepfake and imitate one of the artists and start communicating with their fans, and it was combined with theft of some of their personal information. But the potential of deepfakes means that it can be even more compelling. It's just not they're texting them, they're potentially sending voice messages, sending digital, engaging in real-time visual messages. And that's a very subversive use of deepfakes. It's happening on the individual level, but it's also scalable.
It's subversive, Kassi, but I will just say, you're also going to see authorized use like that, and primarily through things like OnlyFans.
Cameo,
right?
like a Cameo extension where that's true.
Premium content like that. Yeah, we're about 12 minutes left to the hour. So I want to get to the last and finding some questions. We've got 4 questions now in the queue. So I want to have some time for questions at the end. But I want to say to move into the next section. Let's see. Okay, good. The rise of the consent-based replica, right? So we've talked about a terrific variety of conversational topics today around the use of AI, the consent-based usages, what Veronica talked about, the 4 C's of consent, control, credit, and compensation. The notion that consent-based replicas can happen. My company did participate in a proof of concept at the International Broadcasting Convention conference back in September around a digital replica provenance automation story. How a replica could be created, a proof of concept. I've got a 90-second video I'd like to show everybody here with your time that is like a little sizzle reel from IBC. And I just want to stop our presentation here for a second to stop share and bump over to this little video clip that's queued up here. And I'll just gotta change my sharing thing here for 1 second in the QuickTime player, and boom. And here is the video, and I'll go full screen on this guy, and boom.
A bill aimed at protecting performers. The Actors Union wants, quote, explicit consent to use the digital likeness of performers.
Rallied to drown out deepfakes.
Deepfakes of notable people are becoming indistinguishable from reality.
We are alarmed by the circulation of false images, to be more exact.
My name is Evan Shafrin. I'm an actor, a comedian, and a rapper, and I'm here to get scammed.
Welcome to the Scan Truck Spaceship. Come on in.
Good to be here.
Imagine a world where artists can protect their identity and effortlessly track the usage of their consent-based digital replicas across platforms.
To have a digital replica made of myself, which I own, is amazing. I'm a performer and I'm an artist, and we're putting our likeness out there, and somebody is making it work for us, but it's still our image at the end of the day. I am excited because I think that a lot of people aren't aware that this is being created right now for our protection. So when I found out, it immediately sparked in me, oh, wow, I can create my own short film or animated series using my own image. I'm excited for everybody to see this new opportunity in ways that we can work together.
A world designed to support the 4 C's: consent, control, credit, and compensation of talent.
And those were our partners. And there's the closing bumper. So that was a lot of fun to pull that off and to have a chance to talk about that at IBC. I'm going to pop back up to the slide that we were all on a second ago, and just got to locate that. Here we go. Boom. Okay. So the rise of consent-based digital replicas. Many of you who are familiar with the industry consortium C2PA, the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity, are working on ways to add the level of provenance, detectability, observability, traceability of objects, be they like a text file or an image generated by Midjourney or a ChatGPT or by OpenAI, and also to be able to attest to the authenticity of a video, perhaps like with Evan's video, which we did. Cryptographic metadata, our hand talent ID was embedded in that. It was watermarked, fingerprinted, and then detectable at distribution endpoints and playout. It's early days. This assembly of choreography and the orchestration of all these things working together, not automate, not business as usual yet. Still working on those things. A lot of work to be done in the industry around providing that chain of custody, the rights story, the detectability, observability, measurement. All those things are still to be worked out. But the early days of the proof of concepts are happening, and that's part of what I talk about the rise of consent-based replicas. So with that example, and with the knowledge that, Sean mentioned the CAA Vault, there's the companies like Vermilio and others who are also working with William Morris Endeavor and others around trying to provide protection for digital likenesses of talent. What are some of the panel's thoughts on that? And I want to save a couple minutes for questions at the end. Let's go with Sean. Back to you.
Well, I'm gonna go with the lawyers on this one. This is really more about where I think
we got three lawyers here, so
yeah, exactly. But I think it's a hot button topic. But I think this is a legal matter over anything else. So Kassi, why don't you take the ball here first? I think.
I'll just jump in and say, from a technical and legal perspective, it is going to be very challenging. Having standards in place are very important. I think data integrity, data quality is the day-to-day, not just the kickoff and concept, but the true operation is going to be a huge challenge.
It's a huge business, right?
Huge business, but it still needs to be done, right? And I think we often think of content as digital created or human created, and there will be hybrids there. So how do we deal with it as it becomes further merged, further grayed, blurred? So that's what I mean.
And Simon, you had recently pointed out, or over time since the CA, the SAG-AFTRA agreement, the synthetic performer carve out in there. You saw that was like, I think you said it was like that's like a hole big enough to drive a truck through.
Well, that's about the First Amendment piece. So what I was going to say, so SAG-AFTRA, I don't have the text in front of me. It's been a while since I looked at it, but basically it focuses on the output, what it looks like, right? Does it resemble the actor?
Right.
The Tennessee Elvis statute, the same thing. Does it resemble? So it doesn't matter how it was generated, it resembles it. Now, SAG-AFTRA have this carve out for the First Amendment that's incredibly vague. And I think the idea is to stop. So you have an issue around, say, you think about a film like Forrest Gump, right? It depicts historical deceased figures, and that would be typically they have no right of publicity. It's First Amendment, blah blah blah. But that's the thing. It's interesting because you're talking about technology, things that sort of change. So it's effectively like a chain of custody thing. This is created. We can trace it around the internet. That is not what the legislation is looking at. The legislation is just completely agnostic as to that. It's just does it resemble it? I think it's helpful.
Right.
Obviously, the challenge is, well, what happens if there's a mass data breach or hack, which eventually seems likely to happen, in my opinion.
Happens every day.
Independently generated and therefore wouldn't necessarily be watermarked in the same way.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, we saw with the Scarlett Johansson, her thing, remember? It's like, and that's the thing, to Simon's point, there's the DNA is that you use my image to create this. And it's like, this sounds a lot like Scarlett Johansson. And does, so kind of like maybe with music, this has always been classically, try people sue over copyright, right? You stole my song. And it's like, that's been a huge thing in music for years and still ongoing, right? I mean, I think it's very similar.
Well, you have to engage musicologists. It's very sort of subjective.
This seems like that might do the same similar
Yeah,
path there.
well,
for,
like
you know,
if you use the word characteristics, right? So SAG-AFTRA talks about if it has the characteristics.
right.
What does that mean? Is it someone's gesture? Is
Yeah,
it like the
right.
way that they
What
use
makes
their
you
body
you?
typically?
Yeah, right. Do I
And
shave my
even with
head?
Scarlett,
look-
the question is like, how close is that voice to her? And like, actually, they did an analysis of the
Right,
voice
right.
that
It's a
OpenAI used
technical-
and Scarlett
yeah.
Johansson, and they
It's
compared
like a
all the vocal
waveforms
qualities.
and-
But like,
yeah.
what is the threshold for similarity?
Right,
Yeah.
And I think we can look to, sorry, the music industry, like there's a huge black hole of unpaid royalties because of data integrity issues with music metadata.
For
So I
sure.
think like that's a great, you know, example and maybe lesson we can learn from.
And the MLC, it was like people talking about act of Congress to get it right. Well, the MLC, the Mechanical Licensing Coalition, was created by an act of Congress to track down those unpaid royalties to people, and they still can't track down everyone. They're doing a fantastic job, way beyond what most people thought, Chris Darren and the team at MLC, but it's still difficult to track down who to pay and how to get them their money.
Also
There's an
because
industry
the
here.
systems are very antiquated. So
Yeah.
part of the
Yeah.
problem is just in the process.
So folks, we have 7 questions in about 2 to 3 minutes here. And I wish we had more time, and there's I would like to take it from the top. I want to put this to all the lawyers on the call. What advice would you give young lawyers looking to break into entertainment law?
Next question. I've been back on LinkedIn. Look it on LinkedIn. There you go. Let's talk about AI.
Right. So there's an argument that integrating AI in the corporate side of television and entertainment can cut costs, but doesn't it also have the ability to make things more expensive if executives don't know how to manage this new type of working from a technological people perspective?
I'd say over time, it's look, maybe today, but you know, these things get cheaper over time, et cetera, et cetera. And look, hey, you want to motivate somebody to better use tools? Tell them it's going to cost them more money. They'll learn. So I think the motivation there will be a factor. But I want to go back to just about the thing about the actors and like the actor who made that deal. So I had to be on set to shoot versus everybody else could use their image. That's how you save days. Those actors are paid per day. So if you can say, hey, I'm going to shoot you 10 days, but I have the right to, you know, to use you in post to do reshoots, that's money out of their pocket. And that's where you're saving the money. So the AI cost may be one thing, but it may be a fraction of the cost that would be to get everybody back on the set to do that, you know, thing and pay.
Well,
you know,
and
the
I think
actors.
you'd probably on the SAG still have to pay the actors, but the point is
Well,
you wouldn't have to get the crew, you wouldn't have to rent the
Sure.
location.
Yeah.
Exactly. X, Y, and Z.
Wouldn't
Right.
have to book the time.
Yeah. So that's where your cost savings can really come in that regard. So it's a wide question, but I think over time those costs even more come down. So
I think a part of what the agreement with the AMPTP was about, like it's the let the market decide. Like if you're Brad Pitt, you can negotiate a higher rate for your replicas utilizations and days off than someone who's like Evan Shaffron, there our actor.
Hollywood is built on leverage. So yeah.
No, right. So in a sense of like saying it's what you can get, right? In a sense from a negotiation standpoint, but also that the determinant might be around the universal, the 360, the perpetuity story of those deals where my likeness is not necessarily a background actor forever.
And we didn't even talk about this, but the question is like globalization, right? Like if translating all of these actors in their voices into other languages, does that increase revenue? This is going to be a question, right? Because if it does, the studios are all going to really care all about it. Because there's one thing about dubbing into another voice, but it's a completely other thing to translate into that actor's exact voice with the mouth moving exactly in time into Mandarin. Like that's going to be a big deal to me to see what happens.
Technology exists, Caroline. Flawless AI. They're companies that do that perfectly.
Yeah, and Researcher and so many, but I don't think it's been tested at scale yet, and I think that'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah.
So we're a little over the top. There's obviously we could go an hour and a half, I think, or more, but there's within the notion of the fact we want to be mindful and respectful of our folks attending the call today that we're already over the top. Any last closing thoughts and comments as we wrap this up today? And I thank you everybody for your time today. I really appreciate it. I know we could go longer, but yeah, we're at that place.
This will change the business. I mean, what the changes are, this is a transformational moment. There's been a lot of the past few years. We were joking before the call about NFTs and metaverse, which were all kind of, you know, they were what they were. This is not that. So we don't know the answer at this point, but this is the internet in 2020. You know, as the internet changed our lives and economy in the late 90s, this is that moment. So that's my one takeaway from all this stuff is you can't bury your head in it and say, oh, it's going to be a fad. Like this isn't that.
This is
And
not
on the
NFT.
heels of that, I heard someone say this week that AI is going to be more transformational than the steam engine, and I absolutely agree. Very bullish.
We weren't around before the steam engine, so we don't know. Listen, that could have been.
How do you know I'm an AI clone, Sean?
We could find out.
With a horse and an ox cart.
Right. Exactly.
Simon, Kassi, Veronica, thoughts?
Mamma Mia 3 coming to theater 2027.
And you love ABBA.
I love that.
Clearly.
Pickup Voyage in London. Still going.
Still going.
Coming to Vegas at the Sphere, I imagine, eventually. As will the Rat Pack recreation of the Rat Pack at the Sphere. We talked about that too. All right. Thank you all for your time today. It's been great. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank all of our attendees and our panelists. This will be recorded on our YouTube channel. And once again, one more thanks to shout out to the DBC team for helping us with today's webinar. All right, then.
Thank you.
Thank
Cheers,
you.
folks.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Okay.